Folks, last night we had a conversation on the show where I talked about these executive orders and how MAGA and Donald Trump, how they are specifically targeting Black America with these orders. Now, many folks are like, well, man, I don't know about all of that. But what have I always told y'all? You have to follow the money. That if you're not having a money conversation, you're not having an American conversation. So you often hear me refer to the Reconstruction periods on this show. And I mention that all the time. Why do I mention that? It is because you've heard me also say, in the history of America, every time there's been a period of Black success, there's been a longer period of white backlash. And see, now you got people like Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Chris Murphy and others, and who just for them, no, this is not race, this is class. That's not what it is. But no, they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. See, what you have to realize is that if you go back to the first Reconstruction, and if you really want an understanding of this, and I guarantee you, if Greg was at home, he would reach back and grab it if he was there. If you really want to understand this, you have to understand this. This is called Black Reconstruction in America, 1860 to 1880, written by W.E.B. Du Bois. This here, y'all, for those of you, if you include the bibliography, if you even include the index, this is a 746-page book where he talks about the period of Reconstruction. What is the period of Reconstruction? It is that period after the end of the Civil War when you had a focus of the radical Republicans, which is not today's Republican Party, the radical Republicans, and if y'all really want to learn some history, go look up Thaddeus Stevens. These radical Republicans, they had no interest in bipartisanship. They wanted to change America. They said, damn the other people, we got the majority, run the bills through. And that's how you got the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, which are called the Reconstruction Amendments. That's when you begin to look at the Civil Rights Act that was passed in the 1860s that provided a framework for African Americans to be able to access, listen to y'all, contracts. I don't think some of y'all heard what I just said. One of those laws that was passed. It was not passed in 1854. It wasn't around the same time as Dred Scott decision. This particular act was passed because the radical Republicans understood that coming out of Reconstruction, that the freed people of African descent needed to be able to access the economic levers of the country in order for them to be able to move ahead. Now, this, if you look at real quick here, I pulled it up. You see this AI overview. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 was the first federal law in the United States to define citizenship and protect the civil rights of all citizens. It also was a bill that dealt with economics. It was economics. And so what began to happen during Reconstruction? I would argue at the Reconstruction period, the first one, is the most successful period in the history of America for people of African descent. Because what happens during the Reconstruction period, you then begin to see freed people of African descent running for state legislature. You see them being elected to Congress. Do y'all realize that which we now know to be hardcore right-wing Confederate, the first state that succeeded from the Union because they wanted to support slavery, South Carolina, that had a majority black legislature? Because you know why? The black folks, they had the numbers. Do y'all even recognize that taxpayer-funded education is a result of those free people of African descent putting it in the state constitution? James D. Anderson's book, The Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935, details that. You then begin to see, I know a lot of people get caught up in 40 acres and a mule, but black folks were not waiting on 40 acres and a mule. They began to acquire property. They began to open businesses. You then begin to see, we talk about Black Wall Street in Tulsa in 1921 burning down. You literally had Black Wall Streets happening all over the country beginning during Reconstruction. But what then happened? And you can look at Eric W.B. Du Bois' book, or if you want to, you can read Eric Foner's book, Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution. He has it from 1863 to 1877. 1877 is kind of important. I'm about to get to it. So what then happens? All of a sudden, you begin to see African Americans creating opportunities, but passing bills. You begin to see them building things and doing things and opening schools. And all of a sudden, you begin to have white folks who then go, you know what? That's enough. We done enough for these Negroes. Listen, we about tired of hearing about all this stuff we need to do. Yeah, I know we had them enslaved for 200 plus years, but can we just move along? We don't have time. White America started getting tired of doing things for those people. We've done enough for those people. Then there's an election, 1876, a contested election. Sounds quite familiar. And so the Republicans and the Democrats then all of a sudden begin to say, well, you know what? The Democrats say, well, hey, why don't we do this here? We're going to let y'all go ahead and y'all can go ahead and y'all had a presidency. But we're going to do a deal. Y'all got to pull these federal troops of the last 3 remaining southern capitals. Oh, I'm sorry. Remember I told y'all they kept saying we're getting tired of that? See, what happened was they put federal troops in state capitals to ensure that the Dixiecrats, the racists, would not take over. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back. See, one of the big mistakes of Lincoln and the radical Republicans, of course, remember Lincoln gets assassinated, being he is followed by an absolute violent racist, Andrew Johnson. What then happens, he then goes, you know what, to hell with that. We're going to return the land to the slave owners if they apologize for what they did. So America put the folk back in power who were the ones who led to the Civil War. So what then happens, you then begin to have this election, it gets contested, and so then there's a compromise. We ain't in the room. The white folks were making a deal, and that's known as the Great Compromise of 1877. Do you all know what came after the Great Compromise of 1877? The Reconstruction period ended. That's when the period of Jim Crow started. These white folks were like, no, we have done enough for these black people. We are sick and tired of doing this. So then we come around to a second Reconstruction. All of a sudden, Emmett Till gets killed August 28th, 1955. Then all of a sudden, you have these black women in Montgomery, Alabama, the Women's Council, who were organizing and they were doing what they were supposed to do. Then all of a sudden, you then begin to have these black women. It was not the black preachers. It was not the black men. It was the black women in Montgomery, Alabama, who were the ones who started the Montgomery bus boycott. Then Rosa Parks sits down. Then it begins December 1st, 1955. They begin to bring them to their knees. But understand, Montgomery, it went all the way to the Supreme Court, but then Montgomery buckled because it was a money thing, y'all. That began a 13-year odyssey where you begin to see the fight over civil rights, and you then begin to see the laws passed, the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And guess what happened? You had these Republicans who actually were supportive of civil rights, and all of a sudden Barry Goldwater runs for president in 1964. He was a senator from Arizona. And then what does Barry Goldwater do? Barry Goldwater then he opposes the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That was his bedrock. King was so offended by that King actually campaigned for President Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1964, something that he never did. But they said it was so important for Goldwater not to win because Barry Goldwater was going to stop civil rights in its tracks. Why is that important? Why is Barry Goldwater's opposition to the 64 Civil Rights Act so important? Because the 64 Civil Rights Act dealt with public accommodations. It dealt with you couldn't bar people from restaurants and transportation. It went on and on and on. Oh, well, I'm sorry, that means that you couldn't bar people. You could not discriminate against people. And so guess what? They inserted women into the 64 Civil Rights Act. That racist from Virginia, Judge Smith, thinking that would kill the bill, it actually helped pass the bill. That's important because you can now go to Title IX, and that's one of the reasons why it was passed, because of the 64 Civil Rights Act. It's a provision of the Civil Rights Act. So why is this important? Because what happens? King gets killed April 4th, 1968, assassinated. 69, Nixon becomes president. Arthur Fletcher brings in forth affirmative action. You have a period from 68 to the early 80s where black mayors begin to take over. You begin to see contracts, quotas, affirmative action, dollars. Second Reconstruction. You had dollars flowing during the first one. You had dollars flowing during the second one. All of a sudden you get to the 80s. Nixon, he's gone. Carter's president. Reagan runs. Oh, the same President Ronald Reagan, who he was governor of California, running for governor of California, supported a bill for white folks not allowing them not to sell their houses to black people. Some of y'all gonna pay attention. The same Reagan who became governor, who when the Black Panthers brought their guns to the state capitol, they immediately outlawed carrying long rifles. They said, oh, hell no, even though that was actually legal. The same Reagan who changed the rules that caused for tuition in college for you to be charged, because they did not want the regular, ordinary, common man to become educated. Man, some of y'all are gonna have to learn some damn history. So what then happened? So here you've a period from 69 to about 82, 83. And Reagan wins in 1980, inaugurated in 1981. What does Reagan then do? Reagan begins to go after affirmative action programs. You then begin to see the lawsuits happen. Then you begin to see the decisions coming down out of the Supreme Court, where they then began to put constraints on affirmative action. That's an economic situation. And Reagan, in his 8 years, begins to unleash holy hell economically against black people. And then what happens on May 25th, 2020? George Floyd is killed. George Floyd is killed on May 25th, 2020. And folk like me said, y'all, this is the third Reconstruction. We said in that aftermath that unlike the first two, which largely focused on civil rights, although economics was a part of it, this should be solely focused on civil rights. What happens in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd? You begin to see white people and Latino folks, and you begin to see Asians protesting, shutting companies down, forcing them to make economic commitments to be change agents. And white conservatives went, oh shit. We can't have this. We cannot have a generation or two of young white people who are reading and being educated about the real history of America. There's no coincidence. The attacks on critical race theory comes after George Floyd's death. Oh, some of you may say, well, I still don't understand. I think what's the deal here? Because the attacks on CRT and the attacks on wokeness were all designed to drive a wedge through conscious white people and the folk who wanted to keep the system the same. You had white people in companies who were forcing them. Adidas announced a $10 million commitment, and the white folks in the company lost their minds so much the next day the CEO said, oh, it's going to be $100 million. Companies pledged 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 billion in economic commitments in the wake of the death of George Floyd. And then the right said, no, we cannot have this. Oh, no, hell no. Remember, May 25th, 2020, Trump was in the White House. We cannot have this because if we have this coalition of young white people who now all of a sudden becomes conscious, who all of a sudden becomes awake, then all of a sudden we are guaranteed to lose elections in the future. And so what do they then begin to do? They begin to complain about books. They begin to complain about what they're seeing in libraries, and what then happens? They begin to run for school board. Moms for Liberty begins to rise up, and so they take all of that fury in 2021 and begin to win, and that goes into 2022. It sets up the return of Donald Trump. But what a lot of people have been missing is that Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954 leads to, of course, in 1955. And all of a sudden, you begin to see the changes made by those federal judges. And so the hardcore right goes, damn it, we got to combat this. And the civil rights laws begin to come in 1960. And they said, no, we can't have this. And then all of a sudden, because of what black people did, fighting for civil rights, and then it was black people's fighting for civil rights, which opened the doors for immigrants to be able to come into the country. Thank you, Indian Americans. You're welcome, Pakistani Americans. You're welcome, Asian Americans, because that's black people make that happen. Then the white folks said, oh, hell no. This all of a sudden, this multiracial America, we ain't having that. That's why you begin to see rich folks, the Mellons of the world, begin to fund the Heritage Foundation, fund the conservative think tanks, because they needed to establish a structure to reframe America, because we cannot have a multiracial America where these people are going to be in power. So we are going to attack economics, affirmative action. We're going to attack voting rights. We're going to attack everything which is the underpinning of the society. All these things happen, which is why, folks, you have a Robert Mercer, billionaire, funder of Breitbart. What does he do? This is what he said. Go to my iPad. Mercer often argued that the 1964 Civil Rights Act was a mistake. According to the New Yorker, a former employee claimed that Mercer asserted repeatedly that African Americans were better off economically before the civil rights. Mercer allegedly claimed that black people were racist, and they were no more racist, that there were no more white racists. He said black people were racist and that there were no more white racists. That's the billionaire Robert Mercer, who was one of the biggest funders of Donald Trump in the 2016 election, who was the chief funder of Breitbart. This election, you had Charlie Kirk, the CEO of Turning Point USA, who was organizing and galvanizing young white folks on college campuses all across the country, especially young white men. This is what Charlie Kirk said about the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Be clear, created a beast, and that beast has now turned into an anti-white. weapon.
Yeah, and that's the reality. And so we just need to fundamentally relook at a lot of our civil rights legal regime. And without that, even though I don't think it's sort of the magic bullet, but I think without that, there's limits to the amount of progress we're going to make.
Let's talk about discourse and dialogue. This topic would have been even more forbidden 4 or 5 years ago, but it's now becoming in more and more mainstream circles. Is that because the problem is becoming worse, or but our side is more courageous to confront it?
Did y'all hear that? We couldn't talk about this 4 or 5 years ago, but now we can. That's a person who literally has the ear of the person sitting in the Oval Office. We do not understand that the executive orders that have been issued this week, the attacks on affirmative action in colleges and admissions, they are getting rid of programs, scholarship programs. They're getting rid of internship programs. They're getting rid of access. What this is about is the complete attack. And this is the goal of exactly what they did in 1877. This is no different than when the white racists in Mississippi convened the Constitutional Convention in 1890. And they said, we cannot let these niggas keep voting. Oh, I know, I'm sorry. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, he doesn't use that language, but it's essentially what they did when they gutted Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act. The attacks on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Do understand, right now, you have at least 4 Supreme Court justices who would love to completely get rid of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And why this is important is because the 1964 Civil Rights Act is the enforcement mechanism that has led to all of these changes for Black America since that period. So what they understand, if we assault the 1964 Civil Rights Act and get rid of that, and then we completely get rid of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, what we have effectively done is gutted Black leadership and African Americans from being able to take advantage of what happens in this country. So while a lot of y'all are bullshitting around on whether you can be on fucking TikTok, while you're getting caught up in some bullshit housewife, while you're having your fucking MJ and LeBron debates on who's the GOAT, there is literally, as we speak, an entire focus to gut every single civil right and economic gain that we have had since 1964, because they are pissed with those three acts. They're pissed with the Brown versus Board of Education Act. You have voucher bills that are being pushed in Texas and Tennessee and other places to gut public education. What we have to understand is there is a vicious assault to completely defund Black America. So why did I wear what I'm wearing today? We had this sister on the show. She launched her own athletic apparel company, shoe company as well. So what I'm wearing, y'all, is all Black owned. Well, we have to understand, King talked about it in his sermon on April 3rd, 1968. What do you think this was about? Operation Breadbasket, an untold story of civil rights in Chicago, 1966 to 1971 by Martin Depp. This was about the money. And when you have corporations who are now afraid, who are scared to death, oh, Costco is standing up to them. McDonald's buckled. Walmart buckled. Jack Daniels buckled. If you want to understand what Black folks should be doing, every Black person right now should be saying, the hell with Jack Daniels. Don't ever buy Jack Daniels again. You don't want to stand with us, especially when you are a company that even exists because a Black man showed you how to do it. We should be saying, get Uncle Nearest. Black folks should be saying, Hennessy, where do you stand? Yeah, we're going to stop drinking your stuff too. The only way we are going to counter what is happening right now, this effort to defund Black America, is to say, keep playing with us, we're going to defund your company. Because there are companies that depend upon black market share. Car companies, soda companies, fast food companies, clothing companies. Black America, music companies, entertainment companies. But the question is, do we have the actual courage to use the power that we have? Greg, I'm gonna go to you first because
we don't.
This is about the money, and the money is about power, and the power is about control. And they are executing an agenda, a radical agenda that will absolutely do economic harm to black people for the next century.
Yes, absolutely. I think it was a masterful walkthrough, Roland, very necessary, an important level set for folks who really think this is about one election or one candidate's policies, or whether you like their spouse, or whether they smoke weed when they were in college. Silly things, as you said. The framework that you laid out really helps us connect the dots. This entire, when I call the United States a criminal enterprise, it's not an original criminal enterprise. It is an extension of a half millennium of criminal enterprise called the modern world system. This is a process that did not involve the entire world, that came out of Western Eurasia, what we now call Europe, that combines culture and commerce and politics in terms of state formation. So when we talk about Spain and Portugal, we talk about Holland, we talk about England and France, and we're not talking about Germany, because Germany hasn't formed in a way, and that's what World War I and World War II about. Basically, they were like, we didn't get the jump that y'all got, riding African peoples back into modernity. That's what, of course, Howard French is writing about in his book, Born in Blackness. But what you just laid out for us, it's about the money. You're absolutely right. And the money is a proxy for a larger concept of economics. There is no concept of citizenship that comes out of Africa. The ancient Egyptians did not have a concept, at least one has not been discovered yet. Certainly a concept of belonging and being part of community, but the concept of the civitas, the concept of the polis that comes out of Greece and Rome, really find voice in Western Eurasia as these people began to fight. And by these people, I mean the rich, the elites, began to fight. That's what Magna Carta was about in the 13th century, began to fight over resources. That's what drives land poor and resource poor Europe into boats to go visit this cancer on the rest of the world. And what does that have to do with us right now? Well, the United States of America, and with all due respect to a concept of a 1619 project, it isn't just the British in Virginia, it's the Spanish in what it becomes South Carolina and New Mexico. It's the French in the Mississippi Valley. It's the Dutch in what we now call New York, that was New Amsterdam. They are trying, in other words, to colonize the world for profit. And when the dust settles after their colonies turn on them, the most prominent set of colonies turning on the home country being, of course, the so-called American Revolution, which was fighting over property, now you have the problem that you've introduced us to, Roland. What do you do with people who entered this legal framework as property? This is the Federalist Papers. They've got debates over the Constitution. We are not people. Understand that the idea that Africans are people is a radical concept to these Europeans who saw us the same way they saw the chickens and the gold and the silver and the cotton and the indigo. So what do you do with these people? And here is the problem that they had. You couldn't kill us, and you needed our labor to continue your criminal enterprise. So, Roland, when you laid out the Reconstruction and the Reconstruction amendments, that is the critical thing. When you evoke what is a property document, understand the U.S. Constitution isn't about rights. It's about rights to make profit. It's a property document. It's a document about free enterprise. It's a document about trade. private property is the central concept for the criminal enterprises of these people from Europe and their colonies. And what they codify in the three branches of the federal constitution is a concept of private property. But one problem. You got 4 million of us by the 1860s, and we're not going into that good night quietly. And you're in a global system where you want to expand, and everybody else is in the game of exploitation. So when that Civil War is over, and we fought our own way out of the Civil War, the South wants to continue to profit. The North is trying to keep it together. That's what Abraham Lincoln is trying to do. But ultimately, the decision of slavery, that decision was called because we, who remember, came into that conflict as so-called contraband, meaning what? Property. We took the step to free ourselves. That's what, as you say, Du Bois is writing about in Black Reconstruction in America. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, you see the conflict codified. Why? Because they're saying that African people coming into this now will have a concept of citizenship to beat back that Dred Scott concept, where Tani doubles down on the idea that we're property. They say, part of that language, which is why Byron Allen seized on it, is that we will now have not just political rights, but the right to make and enforce contracts. Now Africans are in the legal universe no longer as property. Sure, citizenship is emerging, but now there's an economic stake. This is a problem. The problem's codified in the 14th Amendment. But watch what happens last. And you've gone through the history, so I'm not going to repeat that. I'm just going to fast forward now to Lewis Powell, who I know you talked about many times. That Powell memorandum that he writes when he's in the Chamber of Commerce in the United States, living in Northern Virginia, and he says, since this civil rights movement has seen these African people attempt to assert a concept of citizenship that they should never have had, and since the 14th Amendment has been eviscerated, as Du Bois writes about, and then used to extend the economic contract through the idea that corporations are legal entities in the form of people. That's what they used the 14th Amendment for, since they've been eviscerating it since the end of Reconstruction. Lewis Powell says we've got to now claw back the concept of private property, claw back the idea of free trade and commerce. And 3 years later, the Heritage Foundation is created. And the first of Project 2025, the first mandate for leadership is created. And so I'll end with this. What you have done, Roland, is put it where the goats could get it, as Joe Madison would say. In a global system that is built on the concept of property dispossession and taking other people's labor, other people's land, that's why we're here having this conversation in English. The thing that has become ungovernable is the concept that whiteness can continue to run the world. They have no choice but to do what they are doing right now. Because the only way you can maintain some kind of political apparatus to keep this going is to ground it in an irrational, vibe-driven concept of whiteness. And the elites, whether it be Elon Musk, who will never get out of bed with China. This is what this electric vehicle stuff is about, because he's over there right now, back and forth. Whether it be the other billionaires who could give a damn about citizenship or anything else, their concept is global, whether it be Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, or anyone else. At the center of this is this unruly group of people, these Africans, these indigenous people, these people who simply refuse to die and refuse to go away. You cannot pour your hopes and dreams into this concept of the United States. What you have to pour your hopes and dreams into is yourself, and take a page from every other group in this 500-year fight who have put themselves first, and then you stand from a position of strength to begin to negotiate. But you talking a language they don't understand when you start talking about we are Americans, we're better than this. Nah. And you just walked us through why.
See, people literally don't even realize how they get played, Nola. This is what the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon in chief said on Monday at the Insurrection Fest at the U.S. Capitol. Guys, the video from the inauguration. You had it up earlier. Yes, the video from the inauguration. They're requested when he thanked black people.
We had a powerful win in all 7 swing states. and the popular vote. We won by millions of people. To the Black and Hispanic communities, I want to thank you for the tremendous outpouring of love and trust that you have shown me with your vote. We set records, and I will not forget it. I've heard your voices in the campaign, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor, we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true.
And what did that liar do? Gut the very things that King fought for. And if you Black and you fail for that bullshit, you are a dumbass, Nola.
He couldn't even get it out. He couldn't even finish the statement because it wasn't authentic. He couldn't even finish the end of the statement that we're going to make his dream come true. Lies. Lies. And, you know, I'm so happy that we're talking about Du Bois because, you know, in the great debate between Booker T. Washington and Du Bois, in many ways, I am a Du Boisian. And I'm going to kind of come back to this MLK, this kind of worship, you know, at the altar of MLK when it's MLK Day. And I would also say, you know, don't be surprised if they circle back and try to not make MLK a federal national holiday. I'm gonna just go ahead and put that out there. But, you know, as we're having this conversation, you know, Roland, as you're walking us through the different reconstructions, the one thing that is rolling around in my head, and, you know, Greg made so many salient points, that question that Du Bois asked in The Soul of Black Folk, how does it feel to be a problem? It is a question that is it's so salient in this moment, because what you're talking about is Black people have been a problem in this country since the day we were stolen from Africa and brought here illegally. We have been a problem because you can't get rid of us. Everything has been tried. You treated us like cattle. You enslaved us. You put us on plantations. There was Jim Crow, Black codes, everything you can think of. We have survived. And every time we surpass a little bit of surviving and maybe get to thriving, to your point, it is completely taken away from us. And, you know, I had posted something on my Instagram, not the popular speeches from MLK, but it was this one quote that he said, basically, how dare you ask of a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps when he does not own any boots? That's paraphrasing. And so essentially, this is like, this is the story of Black person, the Black person in America. How do you expect us to continue to fight over and over and over and over when people are constantly trying to steal our boots? The raggedy boots we may have on, that we are proud to wear, and they are constantly trying to take our boots. And I'm such a Du Boisian. I actually have him on my international relations and race syllabus, something that I got a lot of side eyes for, but I don't care. But you really have to think about this in a context of what we've represented from day one in this country. And also, I'm going to bring in Barack Obama into this. The fact that that Black man was the president of this country and pretty much went 8 years unscathed, you know, no major dramas outside of the tan suit, you know, him and his really Black wife, you know, that did something to white America. It drove them insane, right? It literally drove them insane. So everything that we're seeing is successive. Everything is successive. And you want to even go further back to that. I always tell people, if you've never seen Black Klansman, please watch Black Klansman and watch it until the end. Because what Spike Lee does at the end of that movie with David Duke and how they have been generationally trying to get to a Project 2025 moment. They have been putting in the work for generations. They have been reworking and retooling. And this is where we are now. We've made too many strides. There's been a Negro as the president. Oh, no. No. These Black folks are being way too fancy. Way too fancy. We have to snatch their boots. And this is a moment that we're in right now, the snatching of the boots. When you told us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, oh, but that's DEI, right? That's not merit. We didn't deserve any of those boots that we put on ourselves. So here we are again. They're trying to make us bootless. But what we do know is how to be a damn problem in the United States of America.
See, Larry, I love these people, especially my haters, who out see Larry, they were, Roland Martin trying to tell y'all to vote and why you gotta vote and all this. Guess what? The conservatives were waiting for us to be stupid. The conservatives were waiting for us to sit on the couch. For all y'all smart asses out there, let me help y'all out. Do y'all know the justification that Chief Justice John Roberts gave for gutting Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act? It came post-election of Obama. He said, well, since they voting in record numbers, there's no need for Section 4. And guess what has happened since 2012? Our vote numbers went down in 2014, and 2016, and 2018, and 2020, and 2022, and 2024. We didn't show up in Louisiana, and guess what? Crazy, deranged MAGA Jeff Landry was elected. There are more eligible Black voters in Texas than any state in the union. And guess what? We barely are hitting 50%. Even in places like Atlanta, where you should be seeing turnout at 50 and 60 and 70 and 75%. No, we're seeing turnout in the mayoral elections at 18, 20, 22, and 26. And so what these conservatives are sitting here doing is saying, thank you. Thank you. We have so frustrated y'all. We have so devalued y'all. We have told y'all how the Democrats don't do nothing for y'all, so therefore you don't vote for them, and you sitting on the couch, all it does is solidify our power. And as a result, they are running the table in places all across the country. The reality is that there's no reason Republicans should ever have a supermajority in North Carolina. They don't have it now. But if Black folks voted our numbers in North Carolina, that would never happen. In fact, if Black folks would vote with our numbers in South Carolina would change. Georgia would change. Florida would change. Mississippi would change. When Mike Espy lost to Cindy Hyde Smith in that special election, he lost by 65,000 votes. There were more than 100,000 eligible Black people in Mississippi who could have voted, but who did not. And so for all of y'all who love to sit here and talk about, man, you always talking about voting. You always talking about voting. I don't know why you always talking about voting. Now you understand what happens when they have power. Now you understand when the partners come down and they get rid of and sign executive orders and they begin to gut civil rights and economic rights. And now you understand when they change the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Now you are about to see with your own eyes every single Generation Alpha, Generation Z, Millennial, Generation X, what it looks like to live close to Jim Crow. No, I know some of y'all are saying, Roland, this ain't Jim Crow because I can go to the club with a white woman. This ain't Jim Crow because I can go out and we can go here and I can use this water fountain. I can use this bathroom and I can go here. But you need to understand, and I'm telling you right now, mark it down, 7:40 p.m. Eastern on January 23rd. A year from now, you are going to see a dramatic drop in the number of contracts that black businesses have gotten from the federal government. You are going to see a year from now a dramatic drop in the contracts that black-owned businesses will receive from corporate America and from state governments and from county governments and city governments and school districts. You are about to see an economic calamity come down in black America because too many of us sat our asses on the couch, chose not to vote because we said, well, if I don't get nothing before I vote, then I'm not going to vote. Now you are witnessing with your very eyes what happens. And then what you have are some of these same people who I saw your tweets. Well, I'm saying that we got to do for self. We got to do for self. Let me explain to you, everybody who keeps talking about doing for self. Please explain to me how you are going to do for self in an industry that requires contracts. Please tell me how you're going to do that. If you do not have black companies that control every aspect of the supply chain, then you cannot do for self. And so you cannot show me how in America that if black folks then begin to shut out of contracts from federal government, state government, county government, city government, school districts, how are you going to do that? Right now, you have an assault on federal workers because of MAGA. Black people over-index in federal worker jobs. We are a higher percentage of workers in the federal government than we are in the population of the United States. There are more black people who have high five-figure and six-figure jobs in government than we do in corporate America. So when you begin to see those attacks on the federal level, you're then going to begin to see black people not be able to get the jobs in corporate America, which now means you can't buy a house. You means you cannot save money. You cannot invest money. You cannot afford to send your kids to college. And then when they cut Pell Grants, you can't send your kids to college, to HBCUs, because you don't have the $75 and $80 and $100,000 a year job, because now what are you going to be able to do? And so I need people to understand, Larry, this is what happens when you choose not to exercise that one basic power of voting. Then what you begin to do is lead to an economic catastrophe in the black community, and all of the work that people put in to create even what we got, which was not perfect, we are about to see, and I'm telling y'all it's happening, we are about to see not an erosion of what we built up. You are about to see an economic catastrophe that will take another century to rebuild.
You know, Roland, you know, give the harsh reality for where we are right now, as you know, in terms of the black community. And essentially, before the election, you know, people dismissed a lot of racist rhetoric and said it was nothing, ignore it. It won't have any impact about our livelihood. But some folks, and particularly I'm talking to the brothers out there, 21% of brothers who voted in the wrong direction. Essentially, what you believed is that it's okay to be like a lived-in hostage, because that's essentially what happened is black folks would be like lived-in hostages. Because you talked about the economic impact, and this is connected to the political impact. I also want to mention when you provided that timeline, one of the things we need to do, what's really important, is folks need to make sure they educate themselves. So I'm going to recommend you read Just Permanent Interest by former Congressman and CBC, one of the founders of CBC, William Clay Sr., in terms of understanding it, in terms of where we started, where we are as a black community. And so Roland, your point about how long this is going to take in terms to to reverse all these issues that we want to deal with as a community. And I don't think folks are really prepared. You know, we've seen the last 48 hours. It's essentially kind of like a shock and awe in terms of the executive orders. But we talk about there's a significant number of Black folks who work for the federal government, not only in the D.C. area, but throughout the United States. And so you see, essentially, put out a rat request if there are any DEI programs that they think they missed. If you don't report it, they're going to fire you too. So now you're going to have folks turn on other people who maybe have nothing to do with DEI, submit their people's names, and they may lose their job. And of course, these folks are going to be disproportionately Black. So what does that leave many people in our Black community, in our community, as it relates to economics? The other thing I want to highlight, Roland, in terms of we talk about this historical nature issue about racism in America, is I need the folks to go back and check out the debate between, we had the debate in Cambridge, Massachusetts, between Baldwin and Buckley in 1965.
The same Buckley who supported the Civil Rights Act until Barry Goldwater wrote his book, The Conscience of a Conservative.
Right. And so the title of the debate was "The American Dream is at the Expense of the American Negro." And like many people, I've seen it a number of times, but I need some folks to go back and watch that important debate. And we know Buckley is kind of the father of the modern conservative, network we see today. But it's really important in terms of historically for Black folks to understand that the fight that we're undergoing now has consistently happened for centuries. But at least at some point, particularly, like I said, I talked about earlier with the Great Society programs, that we had some kind of success in terms of ending Jim Crow. And then we've seen some other opportunities. We talked about the election of President Obama, obviously some economic growth. Black folks had the opportunity to go to any higher education institution they want to. But then folks said that's too much. And we need to dismantle all of that. So what you're seeing is a complete reversal of all the success that we've seen over the last several decades. And folks are unprepared for it because they thought that, this is all, smoke and mirrors, this is all a game. No, we're in it now. And so what are we prepared to do? Because we have to continue to keep fighting, but we need to make sure we have obviously some policies in place in terms of initiatives, in terms of what we do strategically to address this issue, because it is going to be a 24/7 fight to make sure that we maintain a minimum of some of the things we've gained over the last several decades, and then make sure not too many of these provisions are reversed, and then fight over the next several years, really for the next several generations, for some of the new laws to make sure to counter a lot of the challenges we've had.
And see,
we're in it now.
Right. But the mistake that people are making is y'all are looking at this through a Democratic and a Republic lens.
That's right.
I don't look at this stuff through a Democratic and a Republican lens. I look at this through a Black lens. I look at this through the eyes of a Black man. I'm looking at policies and I look at how people operate. Go to my iPad. Y'all, if you don't understand today's modern Republican Party, this is the book that changed it all. Barry Goldwater and the Conscience of a Conservative. What does it say right here? Edited by C.C. Goldwater, right? With a new foreword by George F. Weil and a new afterword by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. See, a whole bunch of y'all. Oh, I saw a bunch of y'all. Entertainers too. Y'all were talking about y'all were supporting Robert F. Kennedy. And you didn't even realize the game that he was running. Y'all didn't realize that. And I saw some of y'all, man, well, Kamala, she should have made an outreach to Robert F. Kennedy. Why? Everybody knew what RFK Jr. was. See, y'all ain't, y'all falling for the okie doke. When you are making a decision who to vote for, you make a decision based upon what I see, what I hear, how things are operating. Look at this here. All of these. Donald Trump said, I will end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Y'all fell for it. Y'all sit here and y'all fall for all of this stuff, not even remotely realizing what is going on. You don't even understand, again, what is happening, because you know what I hear? A lot of our people, man, I don't read, I don't watch the news. I don't read stuff. So how in the hell can you be informed if you if you have no idea of what is happening even in the world? Oh, I see the numbers. I see the numbers. And let me be real clear. Let me be real clear. This is not a shot at folk I know. Oh, but I'll see y'all loving shenanigans in sports YouTube channels and commentaries. Oh, and everything is fun. But let me help y'all out. Let me help y'all. Do I still have the, let me find it. Let me see if I can find it. On Facebook, I'm sorry, this actually was posted just yesterday. I'm trying to pull it up right now. And it showed all of the folks who are getting offer letters rescinded for jobs. Are y'all aware that there were scholarships that were awarded to black folks and others that are now being rescinded? Are y'all aware that there are people who had jobs in the Department of Veteran Affairs where they're trying to take care of America's troops, and they are rescinding jobs for those people? Oh, if y'all want to have the conversation, we can. And so what is happening before our very eyes, we are literally seeing massive changes take place. And some of us are just joking and playing and having so much fun. But I'm warning you. And they're not understanding this, Nola. They're targeting black PhDs. They're targeting folks with masters. They're targeting every single one of the programs. See, we had some simple-minded Negro in the chat. Yeah, you know, I voted for Harris, but Roland Martin was talking down to the regular people in the streets. And I'll say it, no problem, Panther 55. You can kiss my ass. Because, see, I can guarantee you I can go in the streets and, because, see, I know what I'm told. I know there are barbershops that are streaming our show in the barbershops. I know, because I get the letters, and the brothers who were in prison stop me and saying, man, I got through prison watching you. See, y'all can sit here with that bullshit all you want to. Oh, you the boule, and y'all talking down. That is dumb as hell. Because first of all, right now is 5,500 people who are watching YouTube right now. Hey, dumbass, it's only 5,000 boule members. So guess what? And I guarantee you, the entire boule ain't watching me right now. But see, Nola, that's the Simple Simon shit that some of these folk don't realize. And while they sitting here yelling about, you in the boule, you ain't talk to the regular people, guess what? You getting jacked. The programs that are happening, these things are going down as we speak. Nola, you are hearing from these people. You are hearing from I guarantee you are hearing from long-serving diplomats in the State Department, people who have given their lives to the federal bureaucracy, people who believe in what Ralph Bunche was doing, the first African-American to win a Nobel Peace Prize, who are summarily being dismissed because what they say. In fact, y'all don't even. Do y'all have the clip where Donald Trump said he could tell who's an illegal immigrant? Play it.
Open borders with people pouring in, some of whom, I won't get into it, but you can look at them and you can say, could be trouble, could be trouble.
You can look at them and tell you could be trouble. That's what they are saying right now to black people in the federal government, Nola.
First and foremost, it's just plain old school racism. No more, no less. Just plain old school racism. Nothing new. But, one of the most successful tricks ever played on Black folks is to convince a large population of us that education does not matter. Why do you think people work so hard trying to convince people that higher education does not matter? It's a reason. It's a reason, as you alluded to earlier, Roland, as you were talking about Ronald Reagan and, raising the price of education. My parents met at LSU, the New Orleans campus, which is now UNO. And my daddy always tells this story about how he paid my mama's tuition. He paid my mama's tuition out of his pocket. And then fast forward, 15 years later, you have to take out a second mortgage to send your child to school, or that child gets in debt starting out their professional careers, right? So this conversation about, you uppity Negroes, trying to bring back the Talented 10th and all that stuff. At the end of the day, it is so easy, Roland and everybody on this panel, to my colleagues, to seduce angry, ignorant people. And I'm not calling folks out there ignorant, but what I'm saying is, it is.
I'm calling the ignorant. Go ahead.
I knew you were gonna come in. I knew you were gonna come in.
I'm gonna call the ignorant.
I knew I could rely on you for that assist. What I'm saying is it's part of the strategy. It's part of the strategy to target a certain population, because they are thinking of you as ignorant, right? They are thinking of you as gullible. In the social sciences, it's called conditioning, right? So you condition people to respond the way that you want them to respond. And that is what we are seeing. And we saw so much of it, Roland. We saw so much of it over, this administration, especially during those 107 days with Kamala. There was so much debate. There were people that were mad that she spent a lot of time at the HBCUs, that it was too elite. That it was too much about Divine Nine. Okay, that's fine. Maybe not. But the thing that has always bothered me, and I've stood 10 toes down on this, when people try to push back and say, well, not everybody wants to have an education. Education isn't for everybody. And I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to run a race with no shoes on. I'm just not. But I come from a community in New Orleans where higher education that's what you do. You can get married, but you for sure going to college. So I am grateful to my community for that. But this debate, Roland, I'm telling you, it is something for me as an educator. I have dedicated my life to education. And it hurts me sitting here as a Black woman that somehow we have become the enemy. That the Black expert, particularly, all experts right now are pretty much lined up against the wall, and they're ready to kind of like, but when you're Black and an expert, and when your own community doesn't have your back, somehow you become the enemy. You have been conditioned to celebrate the athlete, to celebrate the entertainer. But us three Black asses sitting up here, oh no, not us.
Support the work that we do. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. You heard what we just talked about there. Folks, I can't reiterate this enough. Listen to me clearly. I cannot reiterate this enough. When you've got technology companies running scared, when you've got legacy media not doing their job, when you've got Black-owned media that is disintegrated, now is more than ever for us to have independent media that cares about the truth, that is willing to say what needs to be said. So when you support Roland Martin Unfiltered, this show, when you support the Black Star Network, you're not just supporting me, you're supporting the other shows. Our goal is to add 2 more shows this year. We want additional shows. We want more weekly and daily shows because we want to be able to speak truth to power. We want to be able to say what is necessary where other people are scared. And when you are scared, when you're looking over your shoulder, oh my God, that advertising contract is not going to come in. Well, guess what? A lot of these major ad agencies, they're not even supporting us anyway. You know, in 6 years of doing this show, Group M hasn't done a damn thing with us. Publicis hasn't done anything with us. You've got Horizon, you've got all of these folks, they haven't done jack. And so we are calling it like we see it, and we're speaking truth. And unlike some of these other so-called progressives and people who believe in truth, I'm not running around trying to kiss MAGA ass and kiss Trump's ass. I won't be going to Mar-a-Lago, not for a damn thing. And so this is about us being able to speak truth. So when you support this show and this network with your resources, that is exactly what is happening, because we are trying to build something that is bigger and broader, and actually it has the courage to say what needs to be said, even when it makes other folk uncomfortable. If you want to contribute giving Cash App, use the Stripe QR code. This is it right here. And if you are listening, simply go to blackstarnetwork.com to check it out. Also, because you want to see your checking money order, some of y'all old school, we understand that. See your checking money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 20037-0196. PayPal, R. Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And again, folks, we've got some 4 million social media followers. If only 20,000 of our fans contribute at least $50 each, which comes out to $4.19 a month, 13 cents a day, that's $1 million. It allows us to be able to continue to build, to add these shows and do the work that's required. So your support is needed. So please join our Bring the Funk fan club today. If you've not already joined, if you have given to us in the past, please renew your commitment, because it's important that we support Black-owned media, because Black-owned media matter. With the stroke of a pen, the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon-in-chief Donald Trump has dismantled affirmative action in federal contracting. On Tuesday, the Office of Personnel Management issued a memo instructing agencies to place diversity, equity, and inclusion office staff on paid leave, and all public DEI-focused web pages must be taken down by 5 p.m. Eastern today. These employees are expected to be laid off. Some have already been laid off. This executive order on affirmative action revokes a directive issued by President Lyndon Johnson that dealt with the issue of discrimination in federal contracting. Joining us right now is Damon Hewitt, President and Executive Director for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Don't ask me why he's wearing a purple tie being an alpha. Plus Ron Busby Sr., of course, President and CEO of the U.S. Black Chambers, Inc. No surprise he got a little red in his tie because he's a little Kappa. All right, let's get right to it. Damon, I'm going to start with you. First off, look, we know these guys have been targeting DEI, but going after the Lyndon Baines Johnson executive order is a whole different thing, because that dealt specifically saying you can't discriminate in the hiring of folks when you're getting federal contract. That's a whole different conversation.
Well, look, we always knew, Roland, that they were going not just after issues, they're going after people and also going after the money. That's exactly what this is really about. The same reason why they went after federal contracting programs after the Students for Fair Admissions case, the higher ed affirmative action case. And so this is really troubling. You know, the message being sent here and the implications of this rescission is that federal contractors no longer have to undertake affirmative duties to root out discrimination in their own workplaces and their processes. This is essentially an invitation to discrimination. Yep. And the message that is open season on Black workers. And, you know, look, federal contractors represent 1/5 of the entire U.S. workforce. So this has massive implications for everyday working Black people.
And let's be real clear, which people don't seem to understand. Republicans used to support the civil rights laws. But when Barry Goldwater's book, The Conscience of a Conservative, came out, that flipped it. And then they opposed the Civil Rights Act. You've had conservatives and Republicans who have been saying that a person should be allowed to discriminate. And so that's really what this is about. They do not want to be held to the laws, the civil rights statute saying you cannot discriminate in the hiring. What they're saying is we want to be able to hire anybody we want to, and this is a burden telling us that we can't discriminate against somebody Black or Latino or Asian or somebody who's a woman. That's what this is really all about.
Yeah, we're going to enter a period as follows. Number one, we're going to remind folks of the facts on the ground, but also the law, because no matter what Trump says in an executive order, that doesn't change Title VII. That's the law of employment discrimination. That law was not changed by the Supreme Court decision. That law has remained the same for a very long time. And so these employers have affirmative obligations. What this EO from 1965, the year after the Civil Rights Act, did was it added a layer of protection. It added a layer of affirmative duty for federal contractors to make sure that they were complying with Title VII. So we're probably going to enter a period where this law will be in contest, a period of people talk about rapid evolution. This could be rapid devolution of workplace culture, of open season on Black workers and brown workers. And so we're going to have to meet these people in the courts of public opinion, but also in the courts of law.
Ron, I want to go to you. When the idiot Trump was there last time, you and I talked, and they stopped collecting racial data, correct?
Correct.
So the problem is, we didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what contracting was happening. We didn't know who was it getting. We didn't know if it was an increase or a decrease. And that they stopped collecting racial data across the board, correct?
Correct.
So when it came to, then what they did was they started bundling contracts instead of typically what happens on the Democrats, they unbundle. The only Republican who actually understood the unbundling of contracts was actually George W. Bush. And so typically Republicans, they bundle them back. And so really what we're seeing here with the attacks on, when we see these executive orders, couple that with last year, those federal judges ruling MBDA and also the AA program, what this means, and this is what I kept warning people during the campaign, even now, what they're doing is this is going to have a direct impact on Black businesses getting contracts, correct?
People don't understand that. And as we had been talking, and I know you have been saying it, Roland, voting and elections have consequences. And we had been saying for years, and we saw it during his first term, he tried to come out with the ban on Muslims. He got caught up in the process of George Floyd, and it took his attention away from his original plans. This time he came out the gate making it very clear that he was concerned about his supporters, about his billionaire friends and trillionaire friends, and making sure that the programs and the conversations that he talked about during his first term were going to be implemented immediately upon his inauguration. And we have seen that happen already.
And again, I want to reiterate this. And this is for all of the Simple Simon Negroes who on social media, who were doing radio, television interviews, talking about Trump is going to be putting money in our pockets and how all these things are going to be going down. What they need to understand is that what they are doing is they are going after the money. And then when they target Walmart, when they target McDonald's, when they target corporate America, they're not just saying, oh, let's get rid of these DEI offices. They're going after supply diversity, or what John Rogers with Arrow Capital calls business diversity. And so what we are going to see, and Black people need to wake up, over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years, we're going to see a material decrease in billions of dollars flowing to Black-owned businesses who largely employ Black people, who fund HBCUs and Black interests. And so that is going to be the direct impact of what Trump and the Republicans are currently doing.
Let me make it more clear. During Obama's first term in office, the goal for minority spend was roughly 5%. He surpassed that and hit 7%. His second term in office, the goal was then 7%. He surpassed that goal and hit 9%. If you heard when President Biden got in office, the goal was to go from 11% to 15%. That scared the nation. what we found out was, as you've been discussing, the disaggregation of the numbers, because they will tell you it's 11%, 9%, 5%. But as you have just mentioned, we never knew what that meant to the Black community. And so during this last administration under President Biden, we said we were interested in three things. Intentionality. Let us know what you were doing for the Black community. We wanted transparency. We wanted to know what that percentage meant for Black businesses. And then we wanted accountability. We wanted to know, okay, well, if they're not hitting the numbers, how can we motivate them and what can we do to improve the conditions for Black-owned businesses? And so the reason why MBDA, Minority Business Development Agency, was the first place to go under attack is because while we were there, the goal was to get the increase for Black businesses from 1.5% of the entire country spend to 3%. I had Black people fighting back on us saying, well, why 3%? Why not 13% or 10%? Understand this. Of the $960 billion that the country spends every year, $640 billion is set aside for products and services that all of us can apply, compete for. Of that,
So hold on. The $960 billion, that's what the federal government spends.
that's what the federal government.
Go ahead.
$640 billion is really available because the other portion is for the military. So of that $640 billion, 11% of that goes towards minority firms. But I want your audience to understand who is included in that minority. The second thing I want them to understand is it did not come out easily in reference to the disaggregation of the numbers. It was leaked out. And so once it was leaked out, then the federal government had to address it. And what we found is that of the 11%, the Asian community received 1.8% of the minority spend. They had the fewest number of businesses registered to do business with the federal government, but that's fine. They had large contracts. The Hispanic communities received 1.71% of the minority spend. Black business community had the largest number of businesses that were registered and certified to do business with the federal government. We received 1.5%, the least of all of the ethnic communities. And so you ask yourself, well, where is the spend going? White women, not women, white women received 78% of all of the minority spend. So people are saying, well, Ron, what are you guys doing to fight back on these attacks on DE&I? And I ask myself, well, where are white women? Because they have the biggest law that's available to them, whereas we have the biggest opportunity to gain in this conversation. And so the U.S. Black Chamber, along with other business organizations, are going to continue to fight to make sure that we have our share of the wealth of this country.
Now, again, before I go back to Damon, you gave the 1.5%, but also I want to speak in terms of actually real numbers.
That number represents about $10 billion.
And that $10 billion is the most we've ever gotten.
The most we've ever received. And to be honest, it was 1.5. Then in 2021, it went to 1.55. Then 2022, it has now gone to 1.61. So we, under Biden administration, have improved our conditions. We've improved the spend. We've improved our share. Now we cannot turn back and go back to where we were before.
Yeah, and so Damon, this is the thing that I think the people have to understand when we talk about the battle over civil rights. That is a direct relationship to the battle over civil rights. And that's what Dr. King understood. It was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. That was economics. He said in that speech, of course, which the goofy pastor on Monday did not mention when he talked about America giving black folks a check stamp, insufficient funds. And he always talked about, we came here to get that check. What people need to recognize is that the fight over these civil rights laws is direct because the conservatives, by targeting affirmative action in colleges, impacts black wealth, because we know a black college graduate makes more than a black person with a high school diploma, but a white man with a high school diploma makes more than a black college graduate. When they're targeting these, when they're targeting the law schools, now they're targeting, in terms of affirmative action for medical school. Then they're attacking a program in Minnesota to increase the number of black teachers, to increase the number of black doctors. When they attack these programs, they are attacking the ability of black people to make high 5-figure, 6-figure jobs and earn 7-figure jobs. This is a money battle, Damon.
It is. Dr. King recognized that we could have laws that allow you to eat at lunch counter in a non-segregated environment. But if you can't afford to buy the lunch and buy the meal, then what are we doing here, right? So just to paraphrase Dr. King. So these folks understand this. They are trying to take any means of opportunity and cut it off at the knees. And frankly, if you read this executive order from Trump, labels them as illegal, labels entirely lawful methods as illegal, even things that aren't about race-conscious elections. This is not talking about set-asides or quotas or anything of that sort. This is, and that those things have their place, but this is all about entirely race-neutral methods of training, of education within workplaces among contractors, and also, let's call it insurance, to ensure that folks aren't being discriminated against. They're calling the efforts to stop discrimination in and of itself. And so it's all about limiting economic opportunity from every avenue of American life.
Absolutely. Damon Hewitt, Ron Busby, I appreciate both of y'all joining us on the show. We're going to have this conversation, trust me, a hell of a lot more over the next 4 years.
Thank you for having us.
We'll be here, man.
Bringing my panel right now, Rebecca Carruthers, Vice President, Fair Election Center out of D.C., Jade Mathis, Esquire, with the Jade Mathis Law Firm out of D.C., and Political Sis, social media, political activist out of Knightdale, North Carolina. Glad to have all three of you here. Rebecca, I'll start with you. I keep saying that if you go down 2 blocks from here, there's only one federal agency that shares a lawn with the White House, and that is the Treasury Department. White House is power, Treasury Department is money, power and money. If you ain't having a money conversation, you're not having an American conversation. And what people need to understand, which is why I wrote this book, White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds. This is a money conversation. And what these right-wing MAGA people are pissed off about, they do not want to see black people continuing to advance. And so they want to shut down all of these programs that have aided African Americans in being able to generate wealth.
You know what, Roland? I spent a lot of time talking about how I grew up in the Midwest, Nebraska specifically. And one of the things I really learned about racism in this country, especially when my family would go to the South to visit relatives, is in the South, white people generally don't care about what you have as long as you don't live next door to them. If you live down the street, that's fine. You can have whatever you want. But up north and also in the Midwest, they don't care if you live next door to them. They don't care if you live across the street, but you better not be doing better than what they are. And so what's interesting with watching this new administration, the second term of President Trump, like you said, this is purely a money grab because quite frankly, $10 billion in a near $1 trillion budget really isn't that much money when we talked about the 1.5% that black folks as a racial minority gets in these different set-asides to make sure there's a diverse supply chain within the federal government. And like when you talked about that 78% number, 78% of that, like $660 billion is going to white women. So in the grand scheme of things, $10 billion isn't that much for our community. It's not that much across the United States, quite frankly. But the fact that we are even getting that for some of these people, that's the problem because they feel like we should not be getting anything.
I mean, here's what's crazy, Jade. The white woman in Tennessee that sued the 8A program, here's what was crazy. She was a part of a program for women. That's how she was able to get contracts. She then sues the 8A program saying, oh, I can't participate in that, and she never even applied. So the white woman was mad at the program for minorities, and she was mad that it didn't include her, but she had no problem with the program that was for women, for white women like her. And this is what we are dealing with. These white folks talk about, oh no, it needs to be a meritocracy. It needs to be, oh no, we shouldn't have double standards. But they got no problem when we know white folks are getting a hookup for their whiteness.
Yes, and speaking of hookup, that is one word Trump never uses, or we don't hear often uses, nepotism, right? They talk about everything else, and we want it to be equal here, and gender rights, and all of this, but nepotism was the one key word that he always leaves out, which he was the beneficiary of, right? And I essentially feel like what Trump is saying about DEI is that he's implying that it's discriminatory, but it's only discriminatory when whites, Asian Americans, and white women, when they don't get their way or when they don't get the positions that they want. That's when it's discriminatory. I think that's the part that he's implying and willingly not saying.
No, he's not implying, they're actually saying it. That's what they're doing. Political sis, go ahead. You on mute. You're on mute.
I don't
now, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay. One thing I don't think they understand, especially white women, veteran white men, is how DEI impacts them in a good way. When it comes to Obama, along with the LBJ executive order that Trump took away, Obama added the gender along with gender identity, I think. But that's going to affect white women as well as black women. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind. And I don't know why the Democrats, especially here in the South, can't drill that into white working people, white working women people. But I think if we can do that, then we can get somewhere with some votes.
But then that's going to require people to have a conversation they frankly are unwilling to have.
They're scared to have.
Of course. Support the work that we do. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. You heard what we just talked about there. Folks, I can't reiterate this enough. Listen to me clearly. I cannot reiterate this enough. When you've got technology companies running scared, when you've got legacy media not doing their job, when you've got black-owned media that is disintegrated, now is more than ever for us to have independent media that cares about the truth, that is willing to say what needs to be said. So when you support Roland Martin Unfiltered, this show, when you support the Black Star Network, you're not just supporting me, you're supporting the other shows. Our goal is to add 2 more shows this year. We want additional shows. We want more weekly and daily shows because we want to be able to speak truth to power. We want to be able to say what is necessary where other people are scared. And when you are scared, when you're looking over your shoulder, oh my God, that advertising contract is not going to come in. Well, guess what? A lot of these major ad agencies, they're not even supporting us anyway. You know, in 6 years of doing this show, Group M hasn't done a damn thing with us. Publicis hasn't done anything with us. You've got Horizon, you've got all of these folks, they haven't done jack. And so we are calling it like we see it, and we're speaking truth. And unlike some of these other so-called progressives and people who believe in truth, I'm not running around trying to kiss MAGA ass and kiss Trump's ass. I won't be going to Mar-a-Lago, not for a damn thing. And so this is about us being able to speak truth. So when you support this show and this network with your resources, that is exactly what is happening, because we are trying to build something that is bigger and broader, and actually it has the courage to say what needs to be said, even when it makes other folk uncomfortable. If you want to contribute giving Cash App, use the Stripe QR code. This is it right here. And if you are listening, simply go to blackstarnetwork.com to check it out. Also, if you want to see your checking money order, some of y'all old school, we understand that. See your checking money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 2003 7-0196. PayPal, R. Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And again, folks, we've got some 4 million social media followers, If only 20,000 of our fans contribute at least $50 each, which comes out to $4.19 a month, 13 cents a day, that's $1 million. It allows us to be able to continue to build, to add these shows and do the work that's required. So your support is needed. So please join our Bring the Funk fan club today if you've not already joined. If you have given to us in the past, please renew your commitment, because it's important that we support Black-owned media, because Black-owned media matters.